And really, I'm going to leave it to Angelica to introduce themselves, the Angelica Network. We've got Jane Morrow and Moran Bean Noon, and Moran and Jane have both told us that they are open to having questions during their presentation. If you want to do that, if you just use the raise the hand facility, and Kathy or myself hopefully will get to you and you'll be able to ask a question during the presentation. And also there'll be time for questions at the end, I'm sure, unless maybe there won't be and Jane's going to talk for an hour, I don't know. But I'm just going to hand over to them now. Okay, thanks.
Hi everyone.
Hi everybody. We're just going to share our screen here. Sorry, I'm moving everybody around. That's it. So hi, I'm Jane, and thank you very much to Sinead and Kathy from Second Collective for putting together this brilliant program. We're delighted to be a part of it. And so my name is Jane Morrow. I am a white woman in my late 30s with bleached hair. I'm wearing a red cardigan and an orange and white scarf, and I'm sitting in my home office in Belfast. There's a window to my left and a white wall with bits and pieces on it behind me here. So I'm an independent visual art curator. I'm a writer and a PhD researcher with a specialism in artist development. I'm interested in infrastructure, working across network and production contexts and formal and informal learning environments for practitioners. And resourcing, nurturing and profiling others' practices has been a long-standing facet of my work. I think it's probably important to mention as well the shift that my practice has gone through from large-scale international institutions in one country to freelance and rebuilding from the ground up in another, and how those perspectives have both at various points challenged and solidified the rationale for my work. And you can find out more if you just Google janemorrow.com. That's me.
Okay, me now. My name is Moran Bean Noon. I just realized I can't see myself in the Zoom, so I'm describing myself now from memory, so that's great. I have short black hair and I'm wearing very big red headphones and a grey jumper with a cowl neck. There is a large strawberry hanging on the, well, flat 2D strawberry artwork hanging on the left on the wall behind me, and a bookshelf, I think, with some office stuff on the other side behind me. I will occasionally look off screen to kind of catch up on my notes and probably make some very relevant expressions. That's just how I speak. I'm Dublin based. I'm a visual artist and a visual arts curator. I work independently. So I do work with organizations, primarily publicly funded contexts, and I come in as an independent into them. As an artist, I mostly work with the concept of acculturation and post-migration life. I work in moving image and installation. I like to explore the physical aspects of feeling foreign and of the idea of belonging. As a curator, I am very interested in feminist practices, both artwork and more traditional women practices, and kind of how contemporary art made by women links to those traditions. That's pretty much me. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh, sorry, that's it. So just a quick description about Angelica. So Angelica aims to amplify the voices of artists based on the island of Ireland who self-identify as women or minority gender from underrepresented cultural or ethnic backgrounds. And it's a curatorial resource. So Angelica was created to lead to fruitful relationships and new opportunities, designed to help curators and programmers work with a more diverse art community. It's also a community of care. So through engagement with Irish-based visual artists of intersectional, minority cultural or minority ethnic backgrounds, which includes women of colour, traveller, asylum seeker and refugee, we hope to nurture a visual art community based on care and accountability. And we created this resource with a view to contributing to change. So our hope is that it will grow into a valuable resource for curators and producers throughout Ireland.
I can add just before, if you go back.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Something important about Angelica that people often maybe don't understand correctly. Angelica is not a curated list. We do not act in Angelica as creative practitioners. We've initiated it and we facilitate it, but we don't represent any of the artists. Okay, we can go to the next one. So as you probably can understand or make out from our self-descriptions of our practices, they're very, very different practices. I work as a visual artist and as a curator. I'm kind of a curator who thinks like an artist. I work with artists collaboratively. Whereas Jane, I feel, well, you can talk about that in a minute because I'd prefer that you talk about yourself. But Jane works primarily as a curator with a lot of community and support, I guess, orientation as part of what she does. So our separate practices, we are both quite experienced at this point and we have years of practice behind us. And these practices actually use networks that we have made along the way in Ireland and outside of Ireland. And we'll talk a little bit about how these networks are made and sustained. But basically, these networks, both Jane's and mine, make up a community. And our communities, Jane and my community, if we kind of take these professional communities, there is an intersection between them. So in effect, we belong to the same community and we met each other through that community. And we had a conversation about gaps in this community, the Irish visual arts sector community, I suppose is a good way to define it. And we identified a gap, we saw a need, and we started a conversation about how to fill some sort of resolution for that need. And the best way that we could think about is actually utilize our years of experience and the connection that we had made to engage these networks, to take these contacts, bring them into our intention to fix a gap, to fix a hole, maybe, and actually improve our community and their community. And so both our networks for Angelica came together into one network of contributors. Almost everyone that we had contacted, maybe they couldn't contribute necessarily a name of someone who could be added to the list on the website, which I really recommend. In the first slide and in the last slide, we have angelica.network. So if you want to see who are the artists that are included in Angelica, like by name and practices, go to the website, they're all there. And so I feel like what we have made is kind of made a community that isn't like most of the people who contributed to this list are not people who necessarily knew each other before, but they're now part of our network and they're part of Angelica Network. And this is part of why when we thought about what can we share for this webinar, it's really about how to build a career that includes networks, that works with a community, how to feel like you're able to work within a community that you may or may not belong to from the beginning, and then feel like your practice matters within it. Jane, anything to add to that?
Just that, I suppose,
maybe about your practice that I didn't talk about.
Yeah, I guess that, I mean, if it doesn't sound too arty, I think to say, like, my interest in that community that we're talking about is kind of both theoretical and practical. So I haven't practiced as an artist for a long time, unfortunately, but I'm not saying I won't again, but not right now. But I do see what I do as a form of practice and a kind of discipline of sorts, where I'm kind of constantly trying to support artists in as many ways as I possibly can. So whether it's through work like this, the Angelica Network, or my PhD research into artist studio provision in Belfast, the voluntary work that I do to help artists write applications and so on. So they all have a few kind of interrelated threads around like care and identifying gaps and enabling everyone to work where they are and under whatever circumstances they have. Then things like infrastructure and the tenuous supports that connect each part of the sector, and collectivity and collective action and so on. Some of the things that Second Collective, if you joined their talk at 12 o'clock, that they elaborated on very nicely as well. So our first kind of conversation about this, after Sinead and Kathy asked us to be involved, we were like, right, we need to make a list. I think that's how both of us function generally, like we need a list. So as we said in a recent piece for Visual Artists Ireland, the Visual Artists news sheet, we're just two tired women, so lists have formed like a huge part of how we kind of manage and facilitate this network. Yeah, survive generally. So our do's are kind of, they're very loosely grouped around the following three headings, but they can also kind of be interwoven. So building your practice, progressing your practice, and sustaining your practice. And
I think you can move to the slide.
Oh, so Jesus, sorry. Anyway, yeah, see, multitasking, I kind of pride myself on it, but it's clearly not working for me today.
That's what I'm for.
Thank you. Just, can you keep me right if I'm like talking and not pressing things? But we thought that it was important, particularly around these three, to talk about career trajectory and how that is not, for many people, a straight line of ascendancy like this. And we think particularly, systems at play in this sector, and others as well, but to a lesser extent, in that so much of what we do is self-determined and self-driven, don't necessarily accurately represent our lives, our locations, our identities. And it means that barriers to practice can exist due to a number of factors. So, for example, race, age, class, gender, disability, amongst others. And so this is where the idea of intersectionality came in for us. So intersectionality, in case anybody isn't familiar with the term, means the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about a wee bit more shortly is coming back to that kind of career trajectory and your identity, is how you can determine your own view of success with your own standards. And part of that might be finding a group of peers, such as everybody who is attending today, and who Sinead and Kathy spoke to in their session at 12 o'clock about kind of finding ways to come together, and whether that's a coffee morning once a month, or whatever format it might take. But yeah, we would suggest that finding a group of peers who have shared characteristics. So for example, Second Collective, but the Mothership Project, so a network of parenting artists in Ireland, 9 Collective, a group of women painters throughout the island. Don't underestimate the change that artists, both individually but as groups as well, can make to values within and beyond our sector, and that includes socially and environmentally as well. So I
have, before you move on, I have two small things to say. First of all, I see that Amna asked if I'm a migrant. I guess I am. I normally describe myself as a foreigner, but my practice is so much about that, and I have described myself as a migrant. I am not from here, I guess, though now I am. So yes would be my answer. hope that helps. And then another thing is something about this list. As we mentioned, our practices and our ways of working and thinking, and as you can see, our ways of talking are very, very different. So you're going to see these different approaches in this list because they are things that we have sort of come to learn through our different experiences. A lot of it is based on, well, a lot of I think a lot of the items that I will talk about are based on actual engagements that I had with people. I want to put kind of now a sort of a blanket disclaimer that none of it works for everyone. And I can say that particularly about the things that I'm going to say. These are things that worked and failed for me and that I've seen work and fail for other people. So yeah, you know, take it on with like care. Yeah. Okay, we can move on. Okay, so I'll go first. And the slide says tell small stories. And I think this is something that I bring in both from my experience as an artist and from my experience as a curator and engaging with artists. So this is loosely based, if we were talking about the building, progressing and sustaining, this is a little bit of the foundation stone that when we engage with art context, when we work towards an open call or towards an exhibition, a lot of times I feel that a lot of artists, and me too at some point, feel like there's an expectation to talk big theory, to talk about a social situation, to use a lot of terminology. And I find this is more prevalent in Europe, in the UK, in Ireland than in North America. And I felt like I really wanted to share with you guys, but that's not always necessary. Sometimes a really big idea already exists in a small story, in a local narrative, in a little idea that came up to you over breakfast. So when you engage with your practice or when you communicate about your practice, it's not always about mentioning the isms, knowing the history. I have a PhD and I can't remember most of the names of the people that I have quoted in my PhD, a lot of the movements, like I can't remember. A lot of times my conversations with my partner is him reminding me things. If we talk about things that have to do with my PhD, he'd be the one who knows all the names and the years, and it's not necessary. Art can be highly theoretical and it should be well researched, but the research can be something that you include in your practice. Not everyone has to publish a Marxist essay as part of an artwork. I feel like I just really wanted to get that off my chest in a public forum. Thanks, guys.
And I think, yeah, we'll kind of come to refer to bits of that again in the other kind of examples and things that we've included. Excuse me, I don't want to apologize on Moran's behalf, but if some of these are too broad brush or if some of them are too specific, because yeah, not everything, as you said, Moran, will work for everybody.
You can also ask us questions about these things if something feels too broad and you're not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a bit of just extremely general advice that you're probably all very aware of, but I find that when I'm working with artists, I kind of remind them of it fairly regularly. So yeah, find artists who are making work that is somehow linked to yours. So whether that's in terms of media, subject matter, locality, you know, whatever it might be, and really do use their, you know, people who publish their exhibition histories and so on, use those as a template to think about how you frame your approaches to other galleries or to, you know, whatever the kind of platform might be. Yeah, it's a good way of determining remits within the infrastructure, and yeah, we'll come to infrastructure more broadly as well.
I want to add to that, but don't make a mistake. Everyone does this. This is not simply a beginner's task. Everyone doing practice, and I can only speak of our field, but I'm pretty sure this happens elsewhere. Everyone who prepares for a new project or an application or a job interview, everyone looks at what others do and gets inspired and copy and find, I saw you were talking to blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with this. A lot of the things that we're going to say here, you're going to think that it's obvious and that's what everyone says, and the professionals don't do it. The professionals do it. All of them.
Yeah, they totally do.
And also, Marta, thanks. I can see that you're one of those people who remember quotes and names. It is such a great skill. I'm a little jealous.
I mean, to elaborate on Moran's point about her PhD, I mean, Moran has finished her PhD, and so there are now years between her and her research. And I mean, I can't remember what I wrote last week. So yeah, we're all muddling through. Don't let anybody fool you. Okay, so another really quite simple one: set early deadlines, and if you have to lie to yourself to do that, do, because you're much better like not rushing in at the last minute, especially if you want somebody else to either like proof it or respond or that. Oh, sorry, one of the I've recently had my laptop fixed, and now I can't get it to stop. So even if I have my messages turned off or my phone turned off, they still ding here. But hopefully that'll be the last instance of that. I don't know how to turn it off yet. I've only had my laptop back for a few days. So yeah,
that's yeah. Nothing to add for me.
That's it.
Do it.
Yeah,
it's always worth it.
Just do that. Yeah. Okay.
Another simple one: respond promptly. I guess in short, what I want to say about that is, if you're not hard to get, don't play hard to get. And for 2021, this is like 10,000 million times more important, because anyone who's programming has had, in Ireland and in Northern Ireland, has had very late responses from arts councils. All the programs are, everything was pending. No one knew how much money there'll be. And now that they know, they need to get artists. If someone wants to work with you, and this is forever, and if you want to work with them, there's no point not just reply. Even reply, it was great, I'm generally interested, I'll get back to you with more details later. It's kind. And you know, we get stressed when people don't answer.
Yeah, and just to add to that, almost everybody that you know who is working in an organization has had to revise their program 4 zillion times for various different funders or you know, the media or whatever it might be. So they're each, you know, their communications with artists are kind of a constant stream of in out, and there's a juggling process that's going on about where we need to move things to and so on. So yeah, bear that in mind as well, that if somebody goes, oh, I'm contacting you because we have a gap, you know, try and take that if you can.
4 zillion more or less than 10,000 million.
Oh, thanks. Counting isn't my strong point.
It's not mine either. Our maths is amazing. Let's move on.
Yeah, okay. So as we mentioned earlier, sorry?
Slide.
Oh, ta-da. As we mentioned earlier, and obviously as Sinead and Kathy have mentioned too, you know, connections with others can be key, but for many, I mean, I'm making an assumption here, but maybe for many of you, you might not have had the time or necessarily those networks that Moran and I talked about in order to be able to make those connections. So those time and a lack of connections can obviously be they can be major limitations, but this event is a good place to start. And what Sinead and Kathy are proposing in terms of find ways to get together after this series of events as well is a good way to do that. And there are enormous benefits if you can invest a little bit in that process. So being prepared to start something, whether that is on your own or with others. So that could mean finding a space, starting a studio group or a collective based around your choice of media, even a reading group, for example. It may be that there is a particular gap that you recognize in your locality, or whether there's a lack of representation in your particular media or the demographic that you identify with. So yeah, if it doesn't exist, you can make it happen. It may seem unsurmountable, but you can do it. And don't kind of be shy about doing that either. Don't wait to be asked by anybody. Okay. Can I change that? No.
So yeah, you know, the visual artists of the two of us will bring up failing. I've loads of that, thousands and thousands of rejection letters from the past 15 years. Once again, this happens to everyone. Everyone fails all the time. There's actually nothing wrong with that. I not only handle failing well, but for me, something that I have learned, and I think this is where the word mature actually feeds in quite nicely, though it is a personality. Failing for me has kind of always been an opportunity to learn. And that's the thing that I can say about my personality, that I feel that I can teach other people. And that's really to fail, request feedback, and follow up. It's as simple as that. You're not always going to fail. You're not always going to get feedback, and you're not always going to be able to follow up. But making that into your habitual practice with applications and with projects. And this is also about projects that I'm not applying for. Like I made a project that I worked on for 2 years, and you know what, it just didn't work out. And I kept working angles and got feedback and changed it and followed up on the feedback. And, you know, it's improving. This project still lives somehow amazingly. But in terms of networking, one of my best contacts in Ireland essentially came from a rejection, actually through a person that I think also introduced me to Jane, Deirdre.
Oh yeah.
I applied, I don't know, a lot of years ago for a job with the Market Studios in Dublin at the time. I didn't get it. I requested feedback and got really nice feedback. And when they had another opportunity, and that was for a curatorial residency, I applied again. They remembered me because they're sound people. And we sort of continued the conversation from when they sent me feedback. And that was my first opportunity to work as a curator in Ireland in a way that allowed me to work creatively somewhere that really I had nothing to do with, besides the fact that I lived here. Another festival that I applied for, a residency that had to do with the festival, they didn't accept me. I requested feedback, and the reply I got from the curators, actually, we really liked your work, but we had a technical issue with, this was somewhere in Israel, so with the fact that you are a citizen, but you don't live here, so we couldn't really fit you into our funding. Do you want to just do the piece and we'll pay you as an artist for the festival without the residency? So yeah, that was lovely feedback, but some of the feedback was helpful in how to change things. I'm not a great person at applying for opportunities as an artist, and I have asked for feedback every single time that it had failed, and I'm training myself to be better.
I have two things to add to that. People should give better feedback. It's your damn job to give better feedback. And now, as somebody who has had to do it, it can be as abstruse as anything else, because you're trying to bring things together in a way that isn't necessarily easy to quantify, but it's about, say, for example, where I have worked with groups of artists, to try to form like an associate development program or whatever, and you pick 8 people, it's like it can be really hard to quantify why those 8 fit together and why the other 7 that you interviewed or read applications for, they kind of don't. It's not even that they have the same choice of media or whatever, but there's something that binds those things, and it can be quite hard to articulate. But if it isn't, like, see, if you're reviewing something, or you have to make notes and you have to let people know. And actually, I had a conversation. I was helping an artist with an Arts Council England application just at the end of January there. And I hadn't seen him in ages, but he said, you know, the last time I think we properly talked was when you told me that I had come 3rd in a residency that I was running, and that I loved his application, but here was why. And he said, and it always kind of stuck with me, like, you know, I came 3rd, I was nearly there, and I understand why actually that other person got it. But then I thought maybe you were just being nice as well. And, you know, I wondered kind of if you were just telling me that to kind of sweeten me up a wee bit. And I was like, no, Adam, you came 3rd. Like, I keep remembering it. Like, and I was like desperate. So it wasn't long before I left that role. Actually, I was like, Jesus, I need to find a way to work with him. And I never did. But it's not to say that I won't again. And yeah, so it was amazing just to talk to him about his practice and the developments there. Anyway, very briefly, in terms of failure, I actually was saying, I had a conversation with Marta yesterday, and I was saying that I hit the job market in terms of like the gallery sector right bang on time for the global financial crisis. And so I very much felt like it was my feeling that every single job that I got was like a short-term contract. And yeah, I developed this, somebody told me it was called a portfolio career. So I was like, oh yeah, that's me. But yeah, I actually, it really knocked my confidence because I thought it was my fault. But then I came out the other end of it going, wait a minute, I've worked for like 20 art galleries, festivals, initiatives, and I know all about them, because even though I had a short time there, like, you can kind of then build this awareness and knowledge of different things. And then when you come to a new place, or when you come back to a place, you go, do you know what? I know how they do it there. That's how that has worked for me before. So I actually do think about the things that you benefit from, the processes of those things, even if they do feel like a feeling. They're probably not personal.
I see that Lara mentioned that feedback from organizations she has found very inconsistent. This brings us back, I think, to the very first, well, no, that wasn't the first. The second slide that Jane was talking about, learning from others, networks and organizations. It's kind of up to us in a way to decide what to do with the feedback. So feedback from different places has different weight, and I will respond to it differently. Sometimes I will get, so I recently got a rejection from the Sound European Sound Festival. It wasn't very detailed, but I already knew before it came in that I kind of applied for that as something that's not necessarily exactly the type of art organization that I would fit into because of the kind of things that they do. But it's a contact that I wanted to make through the application. So if you get feedback, different feedback about the same piece, for example, about the same application from 2 different organizations, research a little bit who these organizations worked with in the past, so you can understand where they're coming from. Yes, they'll be inconsistent. Like, everyone is very different. If Jane and I give feedback to the same artist, and this actually happens, like, we talk, so we put it together into one thing that may not feel consistent, but at least you'd understand the relationship between the 2. But when that doesn't happen, it's part of the process is to understand the role of that feedback towards your practice. I hope that helps. Next.
Yep. Okay. So this kind of goes back a little bit to one of Moran's points a wee while ago. So why here and why now? The dense theoretical underpinning for why you're doing what you're doing does not translate well unless you're asking the questions, why here and why now? So this is something that they taught me, I would say, in maybe my second gallery role after my MA. And when curators are being taught this, then artists also need to know it, because it means that you're communicating in a singular language with one another. So why here, why now refers to the context, where you want to work, with whom, so whether that's curators, audiences, and other artists, what the purpose is, why it matters, and when it would be most impactful. And so there isn't a single thing now that I approach, or when somebody approaches me to ask me to do something, where those are not the two questions that are forefront in my mind. Okay, I think it's me again. Yeah, no, is it?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So sorry, I can't see the headings just because of how my
Yes, infrastructure.
Yeah. So coming to understand the infrastructure, this is something that I'm kind of obsessed with, but I'll tell you why. So the infrastructure is about who does what, and that can be, individuals or organizations, where they do it, why they do it, and with whom they do it. It's immensely valuable to understand how things work and why, for example, curators might work in the way that they do. It also crucially, as Moran mentioned just a moment ago, helps to depersonalize things. So, for example, if somebody says no to you, if you propose something and they say no, it may not be necessarily even their decision. They may have to consult other partners or funders. There may be, inconsistencies in there with, as Moran said, well, you're from here, but you don't actually live here, so we can't, it's helpful to think about us rather than, I suppose, I guess this is a very Northern Irish vernacular, but them ins and usins, so it's not like they're doing this deliberately to you in any way. They're functioning within a certain set of parameters. They all have very distinct remits. They all have different ways in which they do things, and those are all things that contribute to that context around infrastructure. Okay.
So learning actively is really about, well, it's about learning, and it's about networking, and it's about being serious about what you do with your time. So it's about, it starts learn actively by engaging with studio visits when opportunities exist, engaging with events when you're able to, with networking opportunities. So actively seek these things that you can learn from seminars, webinars, I don't know. And then it's also about what you do within them. So I think most people have this, well, they come in with this slightly school-ish attitude of, oh, I don't want to ask too many questions. I'm going to be that asshole. And everyone's going to hate me. Well, you know what? I have taken maybe like 4 different courses over the past 2 years in whatever context, not even only specifically art. And I am always that person. I ask all the questions. Maybe everyone hates me, but I am there to learn. So if I have a curator in my studio, which is, by the way, this, and they are looking at something and I have a question, I will ask it, and it's embarrassing and you kind of feel like the nerd. Just do it. This is the job, and we're grown up. No one is going to judge you for it. And if they do, they're wrong.
Excellent advice. Okay, so this is a slightly problematic one, but I think you can either work with the system or not, and somehow we will change the system. But also, this is where I guess people like me can be kind of useful. So the way I describe myself is as a sieve. So if you pour your ideas, just, right, let me start this again. I'm a very bad sieve.
Articulate what you mean, David.
I articulate what you do. Artists choose to communicate through a visual language or through an audio language or a whatever kind of medium it is your chosen form of communication. But written and verbal language is really important in communicating that to funders, curators, audiences, other artists. And so that's where the sieves come in. See, I switched that one around and I shouldn't have. So what you need to kind of do is pour your visual language or your audio language or whatever it might be into this kind of sieve, give it a shake and see what comes out the other end, and use that or use somebody who is one of those people to kind of help you to frame what it is that you're doing, because it is problematic to have to do that in another language that you don't necessarily choose to work in the first instance, because it's not your language. But unfortunately, that is how those systems work. And to get the money, give them what they want until we can somehow overthrow this damn ridiculousness. Okay.
All right, I don't have anything to add to that, so we can move on. All right, that's a super tough one. And that is maybe not in so many words, but kind of that is actually advice that I got maybe 5 years ago. Put your face out there. And this is something that I would not have thought of, that doesn't apply everywhere. But in Ireland, this applies. My work can be out there. I can have a fantastic website. I can apply and even get some opportunities. I can write and I can be active from my studio and from my home and be online. But in the end, in Ireland, it's very, very difficult to progress without people having your actual face in the same room with their face that they can look at and talk to. After I got this advice, I basically went into training. It's very much unlike me. I really hate openings and I really hate events, and I am not naturally polite or naturally sociable. And so the first 6 months, so at the time I had a full-time job in a support center. And I would go, the only events that I could go to were after work events. So it would normally be openings, and I would go to the openings, get a glass of wine and stand in the corner with my phone, not talking to anyone, mostly facing the artwork, and asking my partner if I've been there for long enough and can I come home now? And him, thank you very much, said no, because you need to do this, because this is now what you're doing. And I did another thing in those openings that I'll talk about in about a minute, but it's not easy and it's difficult, but in Ireland, it's necessary. So put your face out with your work. Also, you will be surprised how much people actually know you, that you don't know they know you. Because in one of those openings, I was talking to someone and a very appreciated curator walked up to the conversation. And I think I introduced myself. I'm sorry, at that point, maybe I introduced myself to her the 5th time in a year, because I was completely sure that she had no idea who I was. And she basically kind of reflected to me my own CV as part of the question, and super kindly made it clear that she knows exactly who I am, and maybe we can just talk like people now. So yeah, it's really, really not easy. I'm just seeing what Alida, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is saying. The thing is, of the events and openings is a real stopper for a lot of artists. Cares. Yes, you're right. Yes, but I think first of all, I know that with some organizations that I work with and some others, there is an attempt, and organizations like Mothership, for example, do ask more of organizations to make this more accessible to people who are carers. And second of all, you can maybe do it less when you, but there are like openings are maybe in the evening, but maybe there will be a seminar that you'll be able to go that people who have day jobs won't be able to go to. So find those moments and kind of edit what you spend your time on, I suppose. Okay.
Just to add to that, there was some research done recently by an artist called Hetty Judah in England, and some of you may be familiar with her work, but she makes a series of recommendations like, can we please, if the artist is a parent, can we please have the private view on a Saturday afternoon? You know, it's so simple, and yet we just need it to be recognized and adopted. I just wanted to share a tweet from the other day from a friend of mine who said, remember private views when someone would be chatting to you whilst looking over your shoulder, waiting for someone else better to talk to. So that shit happens as well, you know? Yeah. They can be tricky things to navigate. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said the word next because of the slide, because I thought you were going to move on, but you didn't. Okay. I interrupted you and sorry.
So jumping around a little, back to applications with me, I'm like a broken record. Make each and every one of them bespoke. You know, again, it kind of comes back to the why here and why now. Who are you talking to and why and what is it? But do have a few stock phrases as part of your statement. So for example, you can then like copy and paste them if you're writing, or, you know, blurt them out verbatim if you're in a conversation. I work with a lot of artists who have already kind of written those things for, or had the conversation with them where I'm kind of trying to give them that shake and see what falls out. And then I go, right, okay, and furiously take notes. But then they come back and they go, see, we did this the last time, but I don't really know how to do it for this. And it's really just about the framing. So if you think of it as like a kind of something loose that is orbiting within a structure, there you have the bones of what you need there. It's really just the why here, why now that changes each time. Okay.
So really quick on social media, and I thought of mentioning it because actually all the tweets that I saw years ago from a well-established white Irish artist who was doing very well and who basically said, having a social media account doesn't mean that you're promoting your practice and that you're a good artist. So complimenting the put your face out there, I followed some advice from another friend who told me, you're in a visual field, get an Instagram account. That was towards a residency that I had, and she kind of said, no one's going to know what you're doing if you don't show them. So just use social media for that. So I got an Instagram account, and then I started using the Instagram account to document kind of for myself and archive arts that I've been seeing. And it took a few months before I started doing that, to getting some people that I know from the field tell me, I don't have time to go to all these openings. Thank you for showing the art that's out there. And then another thing that happened is that the artists and curators whose work I was showing started following. People love it when you share their work, fully credited, of course, in a good way. Like, I have a tiny Instagram account. I don't have a lot of followers and I don't follow a lot of people, but the people who follow me are people who care about that. And on Twitter as well, Twitter started as a place for me to read Hebrew because I wasn't getting any practice, but the social aspects of it got really too much for me very, very quickly. And so my Twitter is now all about work and the politics that I'm concerned with through artwork. So it's all about the community. So there's nothing wrong with having social media and promoting your practice. Do not let anyone shame you out of being active online. It's not enough, because you do need to put your face out there and you do need to be a good artist, but I'll give you my handle. But really while you don't have to use it because maybe it's not right for you, don't let anyone shame you out of using it if you feel like it's correct. And then, Jane, I think you wanted to add into that something about your social media use.
My chaotic social media use. So I'm really in awe of Moran's use of social media because you keep it like so professional. So yeah, it's all just so beautifully executed. Mine, so my biography that I use for each of my social media accounts, each and all, is the following: art, pajamas, wine, politics, environment, animals, humans, nonsense. And so if you follow me, that's what you're going to get. So I'm a bit like, do you know what? I'm looking for the same serotonin high when I see fat animals and share them with like 10 people as I do when I am, making some sort of, semi-professional, coherent point about the optics of the art world or representation or any of those things. And so mine is a much more there's a much more level hierarchy there.
Just to say that in the end we did connect on Twitter the most. Like we met through a work thing, but our relationship really developed through social media. And that happened to me with collaborators throughout the years. So there's a lot to do with that, as long as you kind of keep social media working for you rather than become this thing that works for it.
Yeah, exactly. And, I do run organizational accounts or, professional accounts. So my social media is kind of for me as well. Anyway, I just think we both use it in two very different ways.
Totally.
Okay. Now, which kind of brings, I suppose, I don't know if that was a deliberate segue, but follow up on relationships, any offers of support or possible connections. So again, that's like, oh, I'll follow you on what's your handle? And the important thing also though is to know when to stop doing that. And I think it's been an ongoing issue for me, for example, where my direct messages across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are full of messages from artists who are saying, oh, could you just? And so the word just there really bothers me. But also if you're asking me for something, then send me an email, because then once I've read the message, then I have to reply and then I have to do it straight away. And it kind of like, it just shortcut, it leapfrogs absolutely everything else that has been sitting on the list for ages and ages. And so it's just about, treading carefully with that. And there's also, there's an artist who many of you will know from Belfast, who every time there's a new opportunity released, I could almost like count down to the time where he crawls into my DMs and says, hi, how are you? And I'm like, here we go. Which is, fine. That's his way of doing it. But I'm just like, anyway. Okay, which brings us on to...
Well, it brings us on to my two next points, in fact. So I am an artist and curator. Jane is a curator, an art practitioner, and researcher. So we have been on multiple angles of this idea of a relationship in the art world. And we can attest to the fact that all sides involved are in fact human beings, and everyone is working really hard and everyone is not being paid enough. Definitely not at the level and the kind of organizations that we work with. And it's really, really important. And this is really, for me, I think it's been a real challenge, because I know what it's like to be an artist, and I know how stressful it is to produce and to have expectations attached to the things that you say and make and do. But I also know what it's like to have an artist not reply to you, be rude about what you're asking them, be demanding of things that are just not cool, I suppose. And it's really important to remember, even if you're feeling like you're right now at the bottom and everyone really should help you and give you the things that you need to progress, because your work is important. Your work is important and you're important, but so is the other person. And most of the time, not all of the time, people are doing their best. And it's really tough. It's really tough. So, be kind on email, don't shorthand. I'd like to advise in general, when you write an email, do not start it with the person's name. A hello goes a really long way. So, because I get a lot of emails that start with Moran, and I basically go like, I'm sorry, am I now under some sort of command? But it's a sensitivity, because I'm human and I have sensitivities. So think about that when the next time you write to like the director of an organization. In the end, they're also a person who's had a day when they opened your email. So be considerate. And then the next slide.
Oh, hang on, just one more
Oh,
thing.
you have something?
The best piece of correspondence that I ever received was a letter where somebody was intended to address it to Jane Morrow, the curator, and instead said Jane Morrow, the creator. So that got pinned up on my wall, and I was like, oh, have you seen my envelope with absolutely everybody that I brought in? Yeah.
Also remember people's or use or copy paste people's names, how they spell it. We are starting a collection of the various names people have called me since we started Angelica, and my goodness, copy paste. People sign their email, copy paste into the hello. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's next?
Okay. Oh, there.
Right. So in the same way that not everyone owes you everything and you need to be kind, you also don't owe anything to anyone. And in the end, there could be a really, really good artist who has amazing artwork, and maybe they're also activists and you agree with their politics and you agree with their activities and you'd really love to work with them, and you get in touch with them and they're an asshole. You don't have to take it. Don't sacrifice your well-being and put yourself down and think that maybe you've done something. This is, as many times when I talk to Jane, I am now saying things that I am saying to me as well. No one owes me anything, but I don't owe anyone anything either. And people should be kind to me and say hello in the email. And I don't have to produce things to random deadlines for no reason. They need to explain themselves. And this is a belief that also helps me ask for feedback. I will ask super nicely and politely, and I will thank them for whatever they do deliver. But if they're not being kind to me, I'm probably not going to apply to work with them, because they've now lost me as someone who's supporting their organization. And let me tell you, this is the same when I work as a curator. Artists who are difficult to work with and make my life hell to produce things, I don't owe them my time. And this is a privilege that I have as an independent curator and as a person. I don't have to work with anyone. I don't have to spend my time and my professional skills on people who clearly don't appreciate it. So try and keep in mind that you are an individual within this and you deserve to be treated right.
Yeah, all of that, I agree entirely. I guess I agree in theory, but I also have an issue with the word no. And
that's the thing in Ireland. It's very strange.
Yeah, I simply do not use it enough. And so then you end up, so you've got lists and meta lists, and you've got digital platforms, and you've got diaries, and you've got flags in your emails, and you've got people in your DMs. And so, yeah, I don't owe anybody anything, but oh my God, I have to give them this thing because, that also happens as well, because I'm just human. I
I'm just
know.
going to stop there and give a quick reply to Sally, who's asking how long after an application can we ask for feedback? If a few months ago, if it's a missed opportunity, no, just ask for it. Be polite, acknowledge that you maybe waited too long and maybe it's too late, but ask for it. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
so just a really quick
agree.
response.
Okay. They do just check their email though, because quite often if it's something that they're trying to like rush out, say for example to meet the end of the financial year or whatever, they're going to say no opportunities can be given for feedback at this time, because they're like, Jesus, we don't have any capacity. Get this money out, get everything agreed and signed, blah 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 blah. But I actually think that little bit of time, particularly if you're thinking about doing it like after a financial year, that could be beneficial as well. They should have probably said it before now, but yeah, I think you have plenty of time. So
yeah, just ask. Okay, next.
Okay, so this is my final contribution. Moran is responsible for B sound. I think you can probably, like, you may already be picking up on our different like articulations of things, but B and sound is so important. And I nicked this from somebody. Well, I didn't ask her if I can nick it, but she does good work and she's a good person, so she will not mind that I nicked it. So this is from Annette Maloney, and she is a brilliant curator, wonderful human being, who's based in Limerick. And she often talks about the Venn diagram when she's trying to think about what to do, how to do it, and with whom. And, she says, if you're doing those things, then you can't go wrong. And in this sense, it's actually all remarkably simple, but it's like one of those simple tasks it's like pushing a boulder up a hill. Like, the task is simple. It's just not necessarily easy work, if that makes sense.
It shouldn't be very difficult to be found, Jane.
No.
And like, it's not natural for me, for example, but I work at it and it's fine. Like, you learn how to do it.
But I'm not saying it's difficult to be sound. I'm saying that it's remarkably simple when you boil it down to do good work and do it with good people. And that overlap is that sweet spot that you're looking for.
Yes.
And yeah, Annette has said to me before, it's all right work, but they're great people. Or it's great work, but they're assholes. And yeah, so it's that little bit there, that's the bit that you want.
I can add to that you can assume that people talk. So if you're not sound to someone, other people will know about it. Because, network, that's kind of how communities work.
Yeah. Okay. And finally,
I can say that these are, so Angelica.network is the website to see the Angelica artists. A few of them are actually in the audience. Yay! And then there was an article that Jane wrote for Visual Artists Ireland for their news sheet. Is that what that's called? Yes, news sheet. In the January-February issue. This is not the correct URL, but I think we can share this presentation with you guys, and then the link is actually the right thing. And we also talked about sort of the origins of Angelica in a bit more detail on the Visual Artists Ireland podcast. So most of it we tried to not talk about here, because if you actually want to know about that, you can go ahead and listen to us doing this, but being recorded, which is great.
And also, if you follow us on social media, if you follow Angelica, on social media, we don't talk about us much at all. It's not about us. So we're kind of removed from all of that, but there are other ways, like this talk, like the podcast, like the article, that we do kind of say, well, this is where we're coming from, because I think a lot of people, when they first see the work, they're like, oh, but who are you? Where are you coming from with this? And so this is the way that we then kind of explain that, but it's not for us to be front and centered by a, you know.
That's not the point, because it's not curated. So we're not creatively part of Angelica. We're kind of just like the support team.
Yeah.
Okay, so
can I stop sharing?
I think you can. Probably should.
Hi. Oh, there's everybody's faces.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting and informative. Thank you so much for all the work that you put into that. It's really great. I'm just thinking though, Moran, you had replied to Nullig earlier. She had asked a question.
Yes, can Nullig ask it in like voice? I don't know where she is. Hi, Nullig.
Sorry, I have to put my headset on in order.
Okay. Sorry, I just feel like this is kind of a conversation kind of question.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking in terms of like what you were talking about creating a framework of on an application, and I was thinking about, you know, if I have an idea for a new work but I've not made it yet, and just how do I, like what's the best way to kind of put that through if the research is still ongoing, and it'll still be ongoing as I'm making the work.
That's absolutely the starting point for every application form.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't be, a funding application isn't the format for a work that is already underway. So everything is speculative. And again, you're talking about what you want to do. Every funder realizes that is not necessarily what will come out at the end. And, you know, there's flexibility there. So yeah, you're speaking quite speculatively, and you know there is much more of an emphasis in recent years on research and development rather than outcomes, which is a really great thing to see, because you don't want to tie yourself into something that's too prescribed. But talk about, you know, where it is that this has come from, or like what it is, what it relates to previously, or like what might have happened, you know, societally that kind of prompted you to think this way. That's all really valuable information. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff that should be going into an application. Sorry.
My only addition to that is that it's a good idea. Well, it really depends on the kind of application, but I find looking at applications that it's a good idea that if it's very kind of conceptual or research heavy, to show that you have done research either through practice, well, not even either, through practice and about practice. So bring in names of artists who are relevant to what you're proposing to do. If you've done similar work that the aesthetic maybe is a reference to, or if you've had kind of sketches and you've done, like sometimes there's space to include that, just to kind of give some sort of anchor to people who are looking from, like people like me, who yes, I can read an application and a concept, but if I am curating a visual project, sometimes it is about being referred to the correct visual practice to link it up to what I'll be getting in the end if I accept you, I suppose. And if it is a huge, you can assume that if you don't send that, the person will go to I don't know, DuckDuckGo, Google, Facebook, put your name there, and whatever comes up, that's what they're going to think about visually. A way to control that is to offer something.
If it is a huge departure from previous work, then say that as well. That's really important, because otherwise they're going to look at your support material and go, what? And as soon as it stops making sense for somebody, then it's like, oh, put that one to the side and we'll come back to that, or something. You know, there needs to be a kind of consistency between what you show and what you say.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Just another quick question as well while I'm here. In relation to what you're saying about writing and the language that you use in an application, like how receptive are you of if an artist writes an application that doesn't follow the format of what an application usually follows, you know, like under a certain heading, if it tries to
It
yeah, I
depends
suppose
what
be
it is.
playful, I don't know, like be like, or even, yeah,
If it's
I mean, I suppose it'll have to be done really well.
if it's a proposal for, so say for example, where you have a non-traditional format for a call for applications, like for example Tolka, the one that's out now at the moment, which is kind of where Owen, as a big poetry fan, is kind of, you know, he has framed this mission in a kind of stylized way that will command a very different kind of response to an Arts Council Northern Ireland or Arts Council Ireland application, where and I'm not talking about them personally at all here, but you can assume that they will have no sense of humor reading that. Or yeah, again, that's it's like they're kind of not cut out for that. The format of the application will very much dictate that response, and if you're not answering the questions, because they're going to have a scoring matrix for each of those questions, if you're not answering them, they can't actually grade it effectively. So yeah, I would just frame it for the right audience.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions?
Okay.
Huh?
Guess not.
No,
Cool.
we've totally gone over time, haven't we?
Of course.
Yeah, but it's all
Sorry.
good.
It was all so like neat, and then we just started, you know, freestyling. So.
No, it was great. I've taken loads of notes for my own practice, so it was brilliant. Yeah.
I want to say thank you. I read through the chat. I'm going to save a copy of it so Jane can have a look as well. Thank you everyone who's just responded and not Like we appreciate the responses a lot. Thank you and you're welcome. And yeah.
Thank you so much. We've loved having you, and we're really glad that you agreed to do it. We knew it was going to be great.
Thanks for inviting me.
We're delighted to be here. And Amna, did you have a question, or do you want to remind people about your event tomorrow as well, and Jane and
Sally as well?
Oh, Sally's here too.
Yeah. Shall I remind them? Amna's going to speak. Amna Walliat is here in this session, and Jane Cherry, and they're both going to be speaking tomorrow at 12 p.m. If you haven't got a ticket, get yourself one. We're going to have, I think we're going to hear like a bit about their practice and also maybe a bit about their experience as artists. So it's going to be really great. We've had a slight insight into what might be coming, so it'll definitely be great. What else was I going to say? And then Sally is at 2 p.m. tomorrow with Samantha Brown, and they're both going to be talking about similar aspects of their own practice. I think, as far as I know, I think you can use this link for this meeting for that one tomorrow. So if you logged into that, but it'd be great if you registered, because then we'll know you're coming and we'll know to expect you. I don't think there's anything else, is there, Kathy?
You guys will be able to share the presentation.
We're
who signed up.
How could we share that? Yeah, I wonder.
Maybe, I don't know.
We do have the mailing list. We just need to double check if we're allowed to use that mailing list to send out to people for that purpose. You know,
data protection.
Yeah. And we will keep everybody's information private, obviously. But certainly we can share that. Yeah, we'll try to get a way to share it for you. And the recording will go up onto our YouTube channel at some point in the near future.
I wanted to add something. I realized that I put my social media handle on various channels on there. You can all feel free to connect with me, but I just gotta say I'm a bit full up on what I can fit in terms of following accounts. So I'm kind of not really following anyone new right now, and I am as fast as responding as I can, but I don't hang out on social media so much. So yeah, just apologies in advance. I do not ignore you. I'm just trying to maintain some order in my life.
I think we all need that. Well, thank you so much, and look forward to catching up with you sometime in the future.
Everybody stop saying nice things. Oh, it's too much.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you so much.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.